Hello, friends from California. Drawing close to the writings of Shoghi Effendi and being able to better visualize the role he's played as the sign of God on earth in channeling to us, really. The writings of the Guardian as a whole have a terrific coherence and integrity to them in the sense that he alludes to things in later messages that you would say, well, how am I supposed to understand that? It's because you haven't read earlier messages, because the earlier messages will explain something that he then alludes to in other successive messages. So the thing has a complete wholeness to it. What he introduced to the West, the points he made, the emphasis he places on different aspects of the teachings, all of those things have a significance and progressive character to them, it seems to me. And so now we are in this section of the dispensation, which is his elucidation of essential verities of the Baha'i faith. And we're in this section defining with a terrific overview of the station and ministry of the Bab. Earlier on, the Baha'is, yes, they heard of the Bab, but they thought kind of in terms of the Bab was the herald in the sense like John the Baptist was for Christ, and they left it at that. But it turns out that the Bab has a role more exalted than in his ministry. The inner nature of the manifestation is all the same, but in the assignment he's given in the ministry that he carries out, his is more exalted than all of the messengers prior to him in the Adamic cycle. So this places him in a very unique position, and he partners with Baha'u'llah, one of the twin manifestations of the Baha'i dispensation. Now we have been reading some quotations in general that Shoghi Effendi is setting forth about the station of the Bab. After that, he goes individually into the reinforcement, the affirmation of the statements that he's making from quotations, first from Baha'u'llah himself, as we will see, and then from the Bab, and finally from Abdul Baha. So that each one of these points has a bearing on the balanced view that we must take of the station of the Bab in this new Baha'i dispensation. Let's go back to the text where we were looking. The last thing that we saw here. Share screen, I think we have to do here. Let's see. Then all right, are you seeing the text now? We just read last week that so brief a span, Baha'u'llah himself explained, so brief a span, Baha'u'llah himself explains, should have separated this most mighty and wondrous revelation of mine own previous manifestation, is a secret that no man can unravel, and a mystery such as no mind can fathom. Its duration had been foreordained, and no man shall ever discover its reason unless and until he be informed of the contents of my hidden book. Behold, Baha'u'llah further explains in the Kitab-i-Badi, one of his works refuting the arguments of the people of the Bayan. Behold how immediately upon the completion of the 9th year of this wondrous, this most holy and merciful dispensation, the requisite number of pure, of wholly consecrated and sanctified souls had been most secretly consummated. Obviously, this has something to do with the wide range of martyrs, thousands of martyrs that the faith suffered at that time. Then the Guardian goes on to talk about the marvelous happenings that have heralded the advent of the founder of the Bobby dispensation. The dramatic circumstances of the Bob's eventful life, the miraculous tragedy of his martyrdom, and the magic of his influence exerted on the most eminent and powerful among his countrymen. Notice this, he's giving us again an overview of the impact of the Bab in his ministry. Marvelous happenings, dramatic circumstances, miraculous martyrdom, the magic of the influence he exerted on the most eminent and powerful among his countrymen. Recall the episode of Vahid, who went on the part of the Shah to disprove the Bab in his mission and ended up saying he could, so overwhelmed with the truth of the Bab that he wasn't going to even return to Tehran, but continue in the service of the Bab. And then he goes on to say, to all of which, all these points, to all of which every chapter of Nabil's stirring narrative testifies, should in themselves be regarded as sufficient evidence of the validity of his claim to so exalted a station among the prophets. I mean, where do we have a history of any of the prophets of God that's as stupendous as this one? These happenings, circumstances, martyrdom, and the magic he influenced on powerful and eminent in his country. Now, friends, the Guardian took some time before even he wrote the dispensation to himself edit and translate Nabil's narrative, the whole first part of Nabil's narrative, up to Baha'u'llah's imprisonment in the Siyajal. This is he's referring back to this, but he's already given the Baha'i world this terrific volume of history, and he's established as the preeminent book of history, the most reliable, and to which all other Baha'i histories have to, in the future, be compared. There are alternative stories of things in Nabil's that are being translated and sometimes published here and there. At the same time, the Guardian says when there is something that's at variance with the history that Nabil has set forth, he requests that the authors footnote the original line of explanation that's given in Nabil. So you can see the difference between what the variation is, and always hold the standard of Nabil to the various episodes of Baha'i history, because there are documents and things which contradict it. It's just part of the nature of history that you have people telling stories or recounting what they heard from someone who was an eyewitness, or just how it's remembered. So there are variations. Now, Shoghi Effendi tells us that every chapter of Nabil's stirring narrative testify to the validity of his claim to so exalted a station among the prophets. Very important. I wanted to cite a few passages from the writings of the Guardian, various letters he sent out with respect to the importance of the Dawnbreakers. Just insert them here to bring them to mind again. He wrote in 1933, shortly after having released his manuscript of the Dawnbreakers for publication, he was deeply gratified to learn that the reading of the Dawnbreakers has deepened your knowledge of the cause and has inflamed you with new courage and faith. The tale of these immortal heroes of God, so well narrated by the powerful pen of Nabil, is indeed stimulating and spiritually uplifting. It gives the reader a new vision of the cause and unfolds before his eyes the glory of this new manifestation in a manner hitherto unknown. Nabil's narrative is not merely a narrative, it is a book of meditation. It does not only teach, it actually inspires and incites to action. It quickens and stimulates our dormant energies, makes us soar on a higher plane. It is thus an invaluable help to the historian as well as to every teacher and expounder of the cause. Not a mere narrative, a book of meditation, how we have to line our lives up alongside the great supreme example of these early apostles and heroes of the Bab. And again in another letter, I would strongly urge you to utilize to the utmost possible extent the wealth of authentic material gathered in Nabil's stirring narrative, and encourage the youth to master and digest the facts recorded therein as a basis for their future work in the teaching field and as a sustenance to their spiritual life and activities in the service of the cause. Again, he says no one can read the Dawnbreakers and remain cold and unreceptive. The deeds of those heroic heroes are bound to stir the reader and win his support. Who can see what they experienced in the path of God and remain apathetic? He fully approves the idea of holding study classes, for the deeper the friends go in their understanding of their teachings, the more firm and steadfast they will become and more unwavering in their support of the institutions of the faith. Books such as the Agon, Some Answered Questions, and the Dawnbreakers should be mastered by every Baha'i. They should read these books over and over again. The last book, the Dawnbreakers, will show you how the faith was ushered into the world and how its early adherents heroically faced martyrdom and suffering in their desire to establish the cause throughout the world. Knowing the life of those heroes will create in us the urge to follow their footsteps. Sufficient motivation for all of us to return to another reading of the Dawnbreakers. I don't think we ever finished reading the Dawnbreakers. And certainly, can we claim to have digested the details of the book? Master should be mastered. The book should be mastered. My goodness. Returning again to our text here. However graphic the record which the eminent chronicler of his life has transmitted to posterity, so luminous a narrative must pale before the glowing tribute paid to the Bab by the pen of Baha'u'llah. This tribute the Bab himself has, by the clear assertion of his claim, abundantly supported, while the written testimonies of Abdul Baha have powerfully reinforced its character and elucidated its meaning. Shoghi Effendi is foreshadowing to us where his uh, presentation, the assertions of the station of the Bab, where they're going to go. He is going to go first to the statements from Baha'u'llah himself, and after that, he's going to go to the words of the Bab himself, the assertion of his own claim, And finally, to the testimonies of Abdu'l-Baha, which he says powerfully reinforce the character of the Bab's mission and elucidate its meaning. Let us go on to see what the Baha'u'llah says regarding the Bab. This is just going right on with the same passages that we were looking at, but it's parsed out a bit here to emphasize the content. What else, what else, if not in the Kitab-i-Iqan, can the student of the Babi dispensation seek to find those affirmations that unmistakably attest the power and spirit which no man, except he be a manifestation of God, can manifest? Now, the Kitab-i-Iqan is written in defense of the ministry of the Bab. It vindicates his ministry. It vindicates his mission in so many ways. Would such a thing, exclaims Baha'u'llah, again from the Iqan, be made manifest, except through the power of a divine revelation and the potency of God's invincible will? By the righteousness of God, were anyone to entertain so great a revelation in his heart, the thought of such a declaration would alone confound him. Were the hearts of all men to be crowded into his heart, he would still hesitate to venture upon so awful an enterprise. Who but the manifestations of God can reveal to us who they are and why they have come here? No eye, he in another passage affirms, hath beheld so great an outpouring of bounty, nor hath any ear heard of such a revelation of loving kindness. The prophets endowed with constancy, whose loftiness and glory shine as the sun, were each honored with a book which all have seen, and the verses of which have been duly ascertained. Whereas the verses which have rained from this cloud of divine mercy have been so abundant that none hath yet been able to estimate their number. How can they belittle this revelation? Hath any age witnessed such momentous happenings? Friends, these marvelous quotations again relate us back to the episodes of the Dawnbreakers. The verses of the Bab, he himself estimates them to be something like 500,000 verses. This is multiple times the whole of the Quran, which was the previous revelation that we have on record. It's very important to realize the scope of that. An attempt has been made to register all the words that we have of the Bab, and we now have put into a digital database at the World Center, and it comes out to something like 5 million words. There's never been a revelation like this, friends. Neither before, but not since, because Baha'u'llah himself has brought the most great revelation, and the words that are recorded digitally of the verses and writings of Baha'u'llah, some upward of 6 million words. So gives you some relative comparison, though the Bab was so prolific and has been praised by Baha'u'llah for the oceans that have issued forth from his pen. Baha'u'llah himself has poured out the equivalent of 100 volumes in verses, like we were talking about last week. commenting on the character and influence of those heroes. If I can get that text back up for you on the screen. Here we are, commenting on the character and influence of those heroes and martyrs whom the spirit of the Bab had so magically transformed. Baha'u'llah reveals the following. If these companions be not the true strivers after God, who else could be called by this name? If these companions, with all their marvelous testimonies and wondrous works, be false, who then is worthy to claim for himself the truth? Has the world since the days of Adam witnessed such tumult, such violent commotion? Methinks patience was revealed only by virtue of their fortitude, and faithfulness itself was begotten only by their deeds. Wishing to stress the sublimity of the Bab's exalted station, as compared with that of the prophets of the past, Baha'u'llah in that same epistle asserts, in the Gone still, no understanding can grasp the nature of his revelation, nor can any knowledge comprehend the full measure of his faith. We're striving, but we're going to fall short. He then quotes in confirmation of his argument these prophetic words from the traditions of the past. Knowledge is 27 letters. All that the prophets have revealed are 2 letters thereof. No man thus far hath known more than these 2 letters. And when the Qaim shall arise, he will cause the remaining 25 letters to be made manifest. Behold, he adds, how great and lofty is his station. His rank excelleth that of all the prophets, and his revelation transcendeth the comprehension and understanding of all their chosen ones. And finally, he states, of his revelation, the prophets of God, his saints and chosen ones, have either not been informed, or in pursuance of God's inscrutable decree, they have not disclosed. Now, sometimes, friends, it comes up and we say, well, how is it the Bab revealed 25 letters? That takes up all the 27 letters, which are symbolic equivalent of the whole of possible divine truth. And then what's left for Baha'u'llah? And the Bab, in the fountainhead source of their revelations, are identical. They're one and the same being. My own previous revelation, Baha'u'llah talks about, my own previous manifestation when referring to the Bab. Of all the tributes which Baha'u'llah's unerring pen has chosen to pay to the memory of the Bab, his best beloved, the most memorable and touching is this brief yet eloquent passage, which so greatly enhances the value of the concluding passages of that same epistle. Amidst them all, he writes, referring to the afflictive trials and dangers besetting him in the city of Baghdad, we stand life in hand, wholly resigned to his will, that perchance through God's loving kindness and grace, this revealed and manifest letter, referring to himself, may lay down his life as a sacrifice in the path of the primal point, the most exalted word, the Bab. By him at whose bidding the Spirit hath spoken. But for this yearning of our soul, we would not for one moment have tarried any longer in the city. Uh, this beautiful tribute of Baha'u'llah to the Bab, Shoghi Effendi chose as a preface, part of the preface that he writes, prefatory note in the title page of the Dawnbreakers itself, obviously was impressed with this. When the original of the Ugan, which has been contributed, had come down in the family of the Bab, the relatives of the Bab, uh, finally reached a stage in the guardianship where the person who owned it consigned it to the guardian, and the guardian said that it should be kept in Tehran until there was a safe way to send it. It shouldn't be just sent by mail or messenger. Needs a messenger, needs someone personally responsible to bring it. And when he opened pilgrimage again to the um, friends in Iran, Mr. Qadem was one of the first pilgrims coming on the first group of pilgrims from Tehran. And that was the first opportunity that the Guardian had to have the gun safely delivered to him. So he consigned that work, that job to Mr. Qadem through the National Assembly of Persia. And he brought this precious document to the Guardian. When the Guardian unfolded the silk coverings of it and looked at this original book that the uncle of the Bab had received from Baha'u'llah, as he was um, passing through the pages, he saw that in certain places Baha'u'llah had added, annotated some insert, some addition to the work, and he'd made slight revisions here and there to the manuscript written out by Abdul Baha. And towards the latter part of the book, he found this very passage. Amidst them all, we stand life in hand, wholly resigned to his will. He found that in the margin, in Baha'u'llah's own handwriting. Quite significant. He was thrilled to see that had was the very set of words that he'd chosen with which to preface his edition of the Dawnbreakers. Now we need to look for some new materials here, friends. Let's see. All right, we're back here again. Very small printer here on the screen. I'm trying to find this a second. I'm going to bring a text up for you. All right. You see that now? The Bob, these are the words of the Bob on his own station. Friends, with regard to the 27 letters, someone wrote to the Guardian and said, but there are different number of letters in different alphabets. In Western alphabets, there are different numbers, but he's referring here to the Arabic alphabet, which was, of course, the alphabet in use in the time, and still the use for divine revelation in the time of Muhammad and his successors, from where these traditions originally arose. So it has no literal meaning to do with letter by letter. It's the overall bulk of 27 letters. 25 came from the Bab. Look at this terrific revelation. Combined with Baha'u'llah becomes the revelation of the day of God himself. Dearly beloved friends, so resounding a praise, so bold an assertion issued by the pen of Baha'u'llah in so weighty a work, Egon, are fully re-echoed in the language in which the source of the Babi revelation has chosen to close the claims he himself has advanced. I am the mystic Fain, the Bab thus proclaims his station in the Qayyum al-Asma, which the hand of omnipotence hath reared. I am the lamp which the finger of God hath lit within its niche and caused to shine with deathless splendor. I am the flame of that supernal light that glowed upon Sinai in the gladsome spot and lay concealed in the midst of the burning bush. Again, further affirmation of the oneness of this inner light and reality of the manifestations of all the manifestations of God. O Qurrat al-Ain, he addressing himself in that same commentary, the Qayyum al-Asma, I recognize in thee, notice this is addressing himself. He uses this title as also applies to him. We know it more in reference to Tahiri, but it's also part of the explanation of the Qayyum al-Asma. I recognize in thee, in other words, to himself, none other except the great announcement, the announcement voiced by the concourse on high. By this name I bear witness, they that circle the throne of glory have ever known thee. Of each and every prophet, with each and every prophet whom we have sent down in the past, he further adds, we have established a separate covenant concerning the remembrance of God in his day. Manifest in the realm of glory and through the power of truth are the remembrance of God in his day before the eyes of the angels that circle his mercy seat. Now, friends, sometimes we can't find the references, prophetic references. Even Abdul Baha is quoted as explaining something that the Christ has said, and some Christians challenged him, where is that? That's not in the Bible. Where? And he explained that there's many things that, of course, been revealed by Christ which never got recorded. So he has this insight into the past manifestations of God and cites for them. So here's also the Bob is stating that each and every prophet of the past has established this separate covenant concerning the remembrance of God, another titled the Bob in his day. And that these are manifest in the realm of glory through the power of truth are the remembrance of God in his day before the eyes of the angels that circle his mercy seat. Lots of things known to the dwellers of the realms on high that we don't yet have access to, but he's referring to them here. And again, the Bob says, should it be our wish, it is in our power to compel through the agency of but one letter of our revelation, the world and all that is therein to recognize in less than the twinkling of an eye the truth of our cause. Powerful affirmation of the inherent power in the manifestation of God. Now, it may occur to us, why didn't he just do that? And then it would all be over, that everyone would recognize him and the world would be transformed to a new one. But it's the very purpose of this existence, this realm of apparent contradictions, to distinguish between those that hold to the revelation of God, recognize it, and uphold it and adhere to it, to be its supporters, to distinguish from them who do not recognize or deny, or worse yet, arise to oppose. the revelation of God. And these are condemned by Baha'u'llah himself in the Tablet Ahmad. He says, if anyone denies me, he's denied all the messengers of the past. So this is an amazing statement here. One letter of our revelation, he could cause all the world to recognize the truth of his cause. I am the primal point, the Bab thus addresses Muhammad Shah from the prison fortress of Maku, from which have been generated all created things. And the countenance of God, whose splendor can never be obscured, the light of God, whose radiance can never fade. Friend, these mighty statements have been elucidated in the writings of the book. What is this primal point from which everything flows? Uh, Symbolically, it comes down to the point of a pen, the point of the pen which inscribes on tablets, word by word, the intention and will of God on the one hand, and on the other, creates all created things from the ink of his revelation and other miraculous things that he points out. Because spirituality, the forces of the spirit, the forces of the inner forces of the manifestation, he points out are the source for the creation of and sustenance of physical reality. The material reality is dependent always on revelation. Now, one of the problems we have in modern day society and in the godless outlook on everything is that the spirit is generated by matter, that matter develops, and then from matter, mind has been inspired, and such other extraordinary statements. This is not the case in the writings if we look carefully, and you'll want to perhaps take a look at uh, the Tablet of Wisdom, one of the tablets of Baha'u'llah revealed after the Kitab Yaqtas, where he describes some important aspects of the material creation and how it came into being and how it's sustained. Indeed, he talks about it being ever recreated, that the manifestation of God is sustaining it and he's renewing it at every instant. But the instants are so close to each other that we perceive it as a continuum. But indeed, we're dependent upon the sustenance of the manifestation of God, the Holy Divine Spirit that flows from these holy souls, gives birth to creation and sustains that creation. And God himself is transcendent above all of that, and yet is closer to us than our life veins. And this is a mystery that we clearly are told we cannot penetrate or understand. To go back to the text, all the keys of heaven God hath chosen to place in my right hand, and all the keys of hell on my left. I am one of the sustaining pillars of the primal word of God. Whosoever hath recognized me hath known all that is true and right, and hath attained all that is good and seemly. The substance wherewith God hath created me is not the clay out of which others have been formed. He hath conferred upon me that which the worldly wise can never comprehend, nor the faithful discover. Friends, this again, these amazing statements. We ask ourselves, really, we should consider. You might say to yourself, well, this isn't very modest. Who is the manifestation of God? He tells us he's speaking the voice of God. Who is to tell us who they are if they don't tell us themselves? one of the great mercies is that they do set forth their stations. They do establish through these passages of the kind that we're looking at here today, um, and inform us of who they are and of the power that their word has. They do this. I think you have so many other tablets that they state their humility before the force of God, which inspires in them such passages and such divine verses, and that the verses are filled with terrific divine confirmations. We should repeat them out loud. We should think about them, dwell on them, and wonder at the position, the station of the Holy Bob. Again, back to, I can get us back here. Is this one? I am the God. I think this, all right, here we are. Furthermore, to the explanation of the Bob. Should a tiny ant, the Bob, wishing to stress the limitless potentialities latent in his dispensation, characteristically affirms, desire in this day to be possessed of such power as to be able to unravel the abstrusest and most bewildering passages of the Quran. Its wish will no doubt be fulfilled, inasmuch as the mystery of eternal might vibrates within the innermost being of all created things. Abdu'l-Baha adds his comment to this, what he calls so startling an affirmation. If so helpless a creature can be endowed with so subtle a capacity, how much more efficacious must be the power released through the liberal effusions of the grace of Baha'u'llah. Again, the revelation from Baha'u'llah himself outstripped those of the Bab, but they both outstrip all the prophets and manifestations gone before them. Now we need to go back again. Let's see. Where let's do these things. There we are. No, this is the previous one. We want to, I'm sorry, I get sequence of these. Where's regarding the Bob? How long regarding the Bob? Okay. Let us go back to the text now of the dispensation itself. There we are. If you're following the text, we're in paragraph 64 of the dispensation, which states, to these authoritative assertions and solemn declarations made by Baha'u'llah and the Bab must be added Abdu'l-Baha's own incontrovertible testimony. He, the appointed interpreter of the utterances of both Baha'u'llah and the Bab, corroborates, not by implication, but in clear and categorical language, both in his tablets and in his testament, the truth of the statements to which I have already referred. Now notice that he's the appointed interpreter of the utterances of both Baha'u'llah and the Bab, And of all other manifestations of God, Shoghi Effendi states in a letter as well, the master had this power of interpretation of Holy Scriptures. That's why he explains the verses of the Old Testament and the New Testament and the Quran, many different documents. Back to the text of the dispensation itself, he says, in a tablet addressed to a Baha'i in Mazandaran, in which he unfolds the meaning of a misinterpreted statement attributed to him regarding the rise of the Son of Truth in this century, he sets forth, briefly but conclusively, what should remain for all time our true conception of the relationship between the two manifestations associated with the Baha'i dispensation. In making such a statement, he explains, I had in mind no one else except the Bab and Baha'u'llah, the character of whose revelations it had been my purpose to elucidate. The revelation of the Bab may be likened to the sun, its station corresponding to the first sign of the zodiac, the sign Aries, where the sun enters at the vernal equinox. The station of Baha'u'llah's revelation, on the other hand, is represented by the sign Leo, the sun's midsummer and highest station. By this is meant that this holy dispensation is illumined with the light of the Sun of Truth, shining from its most exalted station and in the plenitude of its resplendency, its heat, and glory. Then again, in another tablet, the Bab, the exalted one, Abdu'l-Baha more specifically affirms in another tablet, is the morn of truth, the splendor of whose light shineth throughout all regions. He is also the harbinger of the most great light, the Abha luminary. The blessed beauty is the one promised by the sacred books of the past, the revelation of the light, source of light, that shone upon Mount Sinai, whose fire glowed in the midst of the burning bush. We are, one and all, servants of their threshold, and stand each as a lowly keeper at their door. Every proof and prophecy is his still more emphatic warning. Every manner of evidence, whether based on reason or on text of the scriptures and traditions, are to be regarded as centered in the persons of Baha'u'llah and the Bab. In them is to be found their complete fulfillment. And finally, in his will and testament, the repository of his last wishes and parting instructions, he in the following passage specifically designed to set forth the guiding principles of Baha'i belief, the guiding principles of Baha'i belief, sets the seal of his testimony on the Bab's dual and exalted station, which has been the whole point of this section of the dispensation. The foundation of the belief of the people of Baha, may my life be offered up for them, is this. His Holiness, the Exalted One, the Bab, is the manifestation of the unity and oneness of God, and the forerunner of the ancient beauty, Baha'u'llah. His Holiness, the Abha beauty, Baha'u'llah, may my life be sacrificed or offered up as a sacrifice for his steadfast friends, is the supreme manifestation of God in the day spring of his most divine essence. All others, he significantly adds, are servants unto him and do his bidding. And that leads very well into the next section of the dispensation, which is a thorough understanding of the station of Abdu'l-Baha set forth by the guardian. Notice he disclaims that he has any position in this more than being a servant, the supreme servant, if you will, of Baha'u'llah, the master, Abdu'l-Baha. We'll be taking it up next week. Let's look at some of the questions you may have in the chat that we have here today. Let's see what we've got. Well, I hope that the sound got fixed. Seems to have been resolved. Dear friends, welcome to For Ease of Use. David Mayton. Question: what is the status of the English translation of Dawnbreakers Volume 2? The Dawnbreakers is a single volume. It's not two volumes. Shoghi Effendi chose to translate, edit, and translate the section which had to do with the ministry of the Bab, right up to the time when Baha'u'llah was in prison, Siyad. The rest of the volume is considerably shorter than the first part because there weren't all these horrific events and occurrences that happened in this very explosive and active part of the dispensation of the Bab. Nothing like that. And there are a number of stories which Nabil has recounted in volume 2, what you're talking about, volume 2, or in the remaining portion, the unpublished portion of the Dawnbreakers. And of those, Shoghi Effendi chose a number of references that he included in God Passes By. The House of Justice, when Mr. Balyuzi, the hand of the cause of God, Hassan Balyuzi, was writing Baha'u'llah, King of Glory, invited the hand of the cause to come and examine the remaining manuscript to choose from it other points which might enhance his volume about Baha'u'llah, and they have been included there. So there's not a whole lot left to another volume of the Dawnbreakers. It's nothing like the original, and there are some complications that have been mentioned by Baha'u'llah in tablets to Nabil about things he should edit out of the manuscript. There was, of course, praise and observations about the other sons who were up to the time of the passing of Baha'u'llah were faithful to the cause or appeared to be faithful to the cause. Those stories about them are not of any great interest, may have some scholarly importance in the future, but for the time being, I wouldn't hold my breath about a second portion of the Dawnbreakers being published. Baha'u'llah regarding the Bab, let's see, that's fine. Do the writings then say that the material world emanates from the spiritual world? Yes, very clearly they state that over and over in different ways. You have to make a compilation about that. You could start with some answered questions of Abdu'l-Baha. Mr. Dunbar, of all your memories, can you mention someone who would otherwise be a helpless creature who became endowed with efficacious power? Well, there are lots of examples of that. I don't, nothing particularly comes to mind now. Maybe I can come back to that at another time. I missed that astrology reference to Aries being the beginning and Leo being we've talked about it today. This is just mainly is just it's not to me an affirmation of astrology, but it's referring to the mm, stations of the zodiac and of the signs of the zodiac. So Aries is likened to the bob as the day at the springtime of revelation, so to speak. This revelation came in that station, and the station of Baha'u'llah is likened to Leo being the um, period in the northern hemisphere. I would have to look back to my study guide that's from some years ago to see if I've written anything about that or included some other quotation. What writings do you find most relevant in helping us harness the power of science as a wing of the rational soul and united with religion in bearing fruit for humanity in this clouded moment? I think probably we do well now to carefully study and meditate about the compilation recently issued by the Universal House of Justice on social action. It's full of quotations. Community increases, its services to the community and to humanity must also increase in very interesting ways, particularly letters translated from the Persian, where the communities had advanced to a stage a bit beyond what the Baha'i communities in the West had reached. So that becomes quite important in itself. That compilation has now been issued by the United States Publishing Trust. Also, the National Assemblies of the World have all received copies of it. National Assembly or to book sales within your own community to get a copy of that, which you'll want to have and study carefully. To harness the united power of science, wielded in the light of revelation and by the hands of faith in advancing the cause of God. Yes, so so very important, friends. This science is, although science is apparently comes from the minds of the scientists and the people here, they are but instruments. It's uh, we have clearly established in several places and affirmed in tablets of Abdu'l Baha as well as from Baha'u'llah, where he talks about the uh, transcend into the world to come. They become endowed with terrific powers and capacities, and they become channels. Great outpourings of grace are showered on us in this realm through the manifestation of God. Obviously, all things go back to the power of God, but there are mediums through points through which all this power is distributed. And he says that these signs and symbols of detachment, arts and sciences, and it's through those souls that these ideas, all coming from sciences and arts in the kingdom of God on high, which is a much more advanced realm than ours, to the degree that it's possible to have their expression in this world, they channel into the minds of artists and of scientists. And then you'll see, for example, in the Tablet of Wisdom, there's some references to when inspiration, God decides it's time for such and such an inspiration, he, he may reveal it across the board through these chosen angelic hosts into the minds of various inventors and scientists. For instance, how many countries claim that they invented the telephone? I know we know the history here in this country, but there's other countries that say, no, we did it, or we were the first ones to fly. And general revelation to all humanity. But those that are concentrated on this somehow receive it at an early stage and translate it into outer circumstances. And we're calling that science here. Arts to music, the music that's channeled from the other worlds. There's really not a whole lot of original work coming out of human beings unless they're the instrument of these inspirations. And Shoghi Effendi refers to scientists not even realizing that they're the sort of, that they're this inspiration is being passed to them. So this is very important indeed, and how great it is when these scientists gain or acknowledge a recognition of the spiritual source of that which they're producing. And of course, this is also a reward to them for the discipline that they've engaged in learning the various sciences and mathematics and different formulas which facilitate their understanding and knowledge and application of the inspiration coming to them. It's an exciting subject. By the way, friends, you should understand that, as I understand it from the original languages, arts and sciences are the knowledge of all things. And arts are the applications of that knowledge, of those understandings of pure science in applied. Uh, we think of arts in the Western terms in terms of fine arts, but the term is much broader used in the writings, in the original writings. Arts and sciences includes all the applications of sciences. So Abdu'l-Baha refers to the art of agriculture, the art of dentistry. This doesn't exclude the fine arts. They're there, and he makes reference to the magic of the painter who lifts up his paintbrush and paints the scenes that he wishes. So someone is asking if Baha'u'llah and the Bab ever met in person. As I understand, they never met in person. I just wanted to verify. Yes, you're quite right. We have a tablet from Abdu'l-Baha which states very clearly that they never met on the physical plane. They were obviously in close communion with them, each other spiritually, and one has the episode from the Kashan period where Bob went out in the night and was gone some time, and then he came back again. That's on that basis they're saying that's when they met Baha'u'llah, but we're talking about a vision. Indeed, Baha'u'llah says if we ever met, it would have been impossible to separate us. And in a tablet that that Abdu'l-Baha has revealed, Tafsiri Kuntum Makfiyan, where he describes the hidden treasure and its various stages. he describes there the stages of love, the four that we know. And he said, I want to add a fifth one. The fifth kind of love, he said, is the love, the unity, the sublime interaction of those world shaking universal spiritual realities. Who can enter there? Where will my mind enter into those things? But he does describe it as the fifth stage of love. It's quite interesting. I know on the hidden treasure of Abdul Baha in the future, and we have to wait the timing of all of the careful stages of correcting provisional translations, of bringing them into conformity with the writings and the originals. That goes on constantly at the World Center of the Faith and through their assigned helpers. Originally, as an abstract artist, isn't the refined methods of doodling and scribbling you do as an individual a form of originality? I should think certainly individuality in the sense, originality from your or the individual artist's point of view. Yes, that could be so. Audio cutoff mentioned in the fifth. Did you hear the? I was saying the fifth kind of love that was mentioned um, is the love between the manifestations of God. Did you mention? Do you mean Baha'u'llah added to his own text of the Agon? Yes, he did. He added to the text of the Agon, but before it was given to the Bab, the uncle of the Bab. In other words, Abdul Baha wrote it all out, and then Shoghi Effendi, Baha'u'llah himself amended, added a word or an article or something of the sort. And the longest passage that he added to it was this particular passage that we talked about in the class today. Well, friends, I think we've come to the end. Was there one more for the Bab as he through whom the Spirit hath spoken? What is the meaning of this? Usually, Spirit is synonymous with the nation or the Spirit of the Christ. In Islam, almost always Jesus was referred to as the Spirit. There's a question still remaining from last week about are there lords of different planets? I'm sure that's beyond my capacity to answer, but I did hear Mr. Olinga say when he had asked the Guardian while he was on pilgrimage that he wanted to know what the station of Baha'u'llah as a universal manifestation, what did that mean? Was he the manifestation of God for the whole universe? And Shoghi Effendi said that while we can't limit the universal manifestation, he participates in a power that's universal in character that involves the whole universe. But the mission of Baha'u'llah, he said, was this planet and its spiritual counterparts in the world to come, and the people who are involved here, and the souls that are involved here. He's the Lord of this world and the next. But it seems to suggest that limited to this planet, so that there are manifestations that would be assigned if there are civilizations, wherever there are civilizations throughout the universe, there would be other manifestations of God. We don't know what the stages of that will be. That's an exciting something we'll have to watch from the other world. I think we're not going to get exact information here about that. So, friends, I think that about ties it up for today. And again, thank you for your patience and my limited technical capacities to perform all these various functions rapidly. But I appreciate your patience, and we'll see you again next week.